You know that feeling, right? When your mind just won't stop, and it feels like it's especially hard when you're going through it alone. All those worries and what ifs just keep piling up. But what if there was a way to just quiet those racing thoughts? Find some peace. Today we're diving into Susan Williams's blog, Time for Tranquility, and that's exactly what we're going to explore. You know, Susan's story is so inspiring because she's a woman like you and me who was struggling during the pandemic, and she discovered mindfulness as a way to find some calm again.
It really is fascinating. Susan doesn't present mindfulness as some mystical thing that's just for monks. It's very relatable, like a friend sharing what worked for them. She really emphasizes that peace is something you can find within, no matter what's happening around you.
And that is so important, especially for women like us who are dealing with the anxieties of aging and maybe facing those anxieties alone. So let's start with that feeling of a racing mind. What makes those thoughts feel so overwhelming, and how does that lead to anxiety?
Susan uses this term monkey mind. It comes from Zen Buddhism, and it's such a great image. It's like our thoughts are monkeys swinging from branch to branch, never settling. That constant chatter can make us feel so exhausted and anxious, especially when those thoughts are all about worries about the future.
Now you might be thinking, well, isn't it normal to think about the future? And you're right. But Susan's point is that overthinking traps us in a cycle of anxiety. We think about something that worries us, and then the worry just makes us think about it even more. And before you know it, you're spiraling, like a snowball effect, but for bad thoughts.
Exactly. And Susan points out that this cycle can be especially challenging for women in their 60s and beyond. We might be facing new uncertainties about our health or finances or even our purpose. And it's completely normal to have these thoughts. But the key is to stop them from taking over.
And that's where mindfulness comes in. Susan describes it as a lifesaver, a way to step off that mental merry-go-round and finally find some solid ground. But for someone who's never tried it, the concept of mindfulness might seem a bit abstract. So what does it actually mean to be mindful?
Well, it's about bringing your attention to the present moment without judgment. Now, it's not about emptying your mind, which is what a lot of people think. It's about noticing those thoughts without getting swept away by them. Susan has this great way of explaining it in her blog. She compares our thoughts to clouds. They pass through the sky. We can observe them, acknowledge them, but we let them drift on by. We don't cling to them.
That's such a great image. So instead of getting caught in the storm of our thoughts, mindfulness is about finding that calm space within, like the eye of the storm.
Exactly. And Susan is very clear that mindfulness isn't about some perfect bliss. It's about awareness and acceptance, being present with whatever comes up, good or bad.
So how did Susan actually start her journey with mindfulness? Did she just jump into these complicated meditation techniques?
Not at all. She started very simply with the breath. She found that mindful breathing was really powerful for bringing her back to the present moment. It helped her to kind of anchor herself when her thoughts were racing.
That makes sense. We always talk about taking a deep breath when we're feeling stressed, but Susan's blog seems to suggest that it's much more than just a quick inhale and exhale.
Oh, absolutely. Mindful breathing is about tuning into your breath, how it feels as it enters and leaves your body. You notice the rise and fall of your chest, even the coolness of the air as you inhale, and then the warmth as you exhale. And by focusing on these sensations, you're shifting your attention away from those racing thoughts and grounding yourself in the present.
It sounds so simple, yet so powerful, like you're hitting pause on the mental chatter and giving yourself some space for stillness and calm.
Exactly. And Susan isn't the first one to discover the power of the breath. It's been around for centuries, especially in ancient traditions like Zen Buddhism and Hinduism. In these traditions, the breath is seen as this vital life force that connects the mind and body. Think about practices like pranayama in yoga or zazen in Zen meditation. They all emphasize breath awareness as the basis for well-being.
It's incredible how those ancient practices are becoming more and more relevant today as we try to cope with stress and anxiety, but it can still seem a little intimidating for someone who is new to this. Susan's blog mentions a specific breathing technique that she uses. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Of course. Susan calls it the 4-4-4-4 breathing technique, and it's something you can try right now, wherever you are. Just find a comfortable position, close your eyes if you like, and start by inhaling slowly through your nose to a count of 4. Hold your breath gently for another count of 4. Then exhale slowly through your mouth for 4 counts, and finally, hold your breath again for 4 counts before you repeat the cycle.
It's amazing how something so simple can have such a profound effect. I'm feeling more relaxed just by talking about it. What is actually happening in our bodies when we breathe like this?
Deep, slow breathing like this triggers your parasympathetic nervous system. It's the system responsible for our body's relaxation response. It's the opposite of that fight or flight response we feel when we're stressed. When you do this mindful breathing, your heart rate slows, your blood pressure drops, and your muscles begin to relax. It's like you're telling your whole body to calm down.
So it's not just calming the mind, but the body too, creating peace and ease throughout your entire being.
Exactly. And there's another fascinating aspect to mindful breathing. In many spiritual traditions, the breath is prana, a vital life force that connects us to the universe. So when you breathe mindfully, you're not just relaxing your body and calming your mind, you're tapping into something much bigger than yourself. It's a beautiful way to find stillness and peace in the middle of the chaos of everyday life.
Wow. That makes me really think about how I approach my own breathing. It's something we do so automatically that we often don't pay attention to it. But Susan's blog makes it clear that changing the way we breathe can change our whole experience.
Absolutely. And that's just the start of the journey with mindfulness. What's so valuable about Susan's approach is that she offers tips on how to actually integrate these practices into your daily life. She makes them feel sustainable and accessible.
And this is where it gets really interesting. We've explored how mindful breathing helps calm the mind and body. But how do we make it part of our everyday lives? I can see how easy it would be to forget to breathe deeply when you're caught up in the day. What does Susan suggest?
Well, Susan highlights that consistency is key. It's about making mindful breathing a part of your day, not just another thing on your to-do list. She suggests, starting small, maybe just a few minutes each day, and build up from there.
That makes it feel a lot less daunting, like you don't have to become a meditation expert right away. I think Susan had some specific suggestions in her blog, right, about making mindful breathing a habit.
She did. She suggested starting your day with 5 minutes of the 4-4-4-4 technique. Just imagine how different your mornings would feel if instead of reaching for your phone, you started by connecting with your breath, calming your mind, setting a peaceful tone for the whole day.
I really like that. Mornings can be so tough, especially if you wake up already feeling anxious. It's like starting the day on the wrong foot. But just taking a few minutes to breathe, it's almost like hitting a reset button for your mind and body.
Exactly. And throughout the day, Susan recommends using mindful breathing as like an on-the-go anxiety reliever. So whenever you feel those worries, those what-ifs start to spiral, just pause, take a few deep breaths, and notice how it shifts your energy. It's like a little mini meditation break, a moment of peace, anywhere, anytime.
That's so helpful. You might be wondering, will a few deep breaths really make a difference when you have these bigger anxieties about life? Susan addresses this in her blog too, doesn't she?
She does. She talks about how so much of our overthinking comes from this need to control situations and outcomes. And as we age, that need for control, it gets stronger. And then when we feel like things are slipping away, our minds just go into overdrive, trying to find certainty again.
It's like the more you try to hold on, the more things slip away. But what's the alternative? How do we let go of control without feeling like we're just giving up?
That is where Susan introduces this concept that she found so helpful: non-attachment. Now, before you think this means ignoring your problems or becoming indifferent, let me clarify. Non-attachment, the way Susan describes it, is about accepting what is, acknowledging your feelings without letting them control how you react.
It sounds like a subtle but profound shift in perspective. Like instead of resisting reality, we're learning to go with it. Accepting that we can't control everything, but we can control how we respond.
Susan uses this powerful metaphor in her blog. She says our thoughts are like waves in the ocean. You can't stop the waves from coming, but you can learn to surf them, to ride them out without getting pulled under.
I love that.
Yeah.
But how do you actually put non-attachment into practice? It seems like one of those things that's easier said than done.
Well, Susan suggests a simple exercise in her blog: journaling. Take a few minutes every day to write down your worries in one column, and then in the next column, write a reminder: this does not define me. It's a way to acknowledge those thoughts without letting them take over your sense of self.
Like you're creating space between yourself and your anxieties, reminding yourself that you are not your thoughts, you are something much bigger and much stronger than that. But is there more to non-attachment than just journaling? How did Susan really integrate this into her life?
This is where it gets really interesting. Susan realized that non-attachment wasn't just a mental thing. It was about aligning her actions with that acceptance. She gives an example of how she used to get so anxious about making plans, worrying about all the things that could go wrong, and she realized that this anxiety was stopping her from enjoying the present moment. So she started to practice what she called radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance, that sounds a little intimidating. What does that even mean?
It's about letting go of needing to control every detail, to embrace the idea that things might not go to plan and that's okay. For Susan, this meant starting small, saying yes to spontaneous imitations, trying new things without overthinking every outcome.
So it's about that balance between taking action and letting go of the need to micromanage every little thing.
Exactly. Susan found that by letting go of that rigid control, she actually opened herself up to new experiences, new possibilities, and honestly, more joy. She says for the first time in years, she felt free, like there was a lightness that came from surrendering to the uncertainty of life.
It's inspiring how Susan was able to change how she felt about anxiety using non-attachment. How can our listeners start using these ideas?
Well, Susan stresses that having a daily ritual for inner peace is key. It's about creating a space in your day that's for your well-being. It doesn't need to be complicated. Even just a few minutes a day can make a difference.
Routines can be so grounding, especially when things feel chaotic. What are some simple rituals our listeners could try?
Susan suggests a calming morning routine, maybe some gentle stretching or yoga, followed by 10 or 15 minutes of mindful breathing. If you like being outside, try practicing in your garden or taking a walk in nature.
I love that. It's like filling your day with tranquility from the very start. Sounds so much better than reaching for your phone and getting lost in the news or social media.
Right. And in the evenings, Susan recommends a soothing wind-down ritual to help your mind and body relax and let go of the day's stresses. It could be as simple as lighting a candle, putting on some calming music, and taking a few minutes to just reflect.
It's like creating a little sanctuary for yourself, a place where you can unwind and recharge. Susan also talks about using gratitude in her evening ritual too, doesn't she?
Yes. She suggests taking a few moments each day to just be grateful for things, even small things. Maybe it was a delicious meal, a phone call with a friend, or just a moment of quiet joy.
It is easy to focus on what's going wrong, but shifting your focus to what's going right, it can be so powerful. Like you're training your mind to look for the good and enjoy those little moments of beauty and appreciation. Beyond these routines, are there other things we can do to cultivate peace and presence in our daily lives?
Absolutely. Susan talked about this idea from Zen Buddhism called wabi-sabi, and it's all about finding beauty in imperfection and simplicity. It's about appreciating those cracks and crevices, the natural flow of life, instead of always trying to be perfect.
It's a beautiful concept, like giving yourself permission to let go of those impossible expectations and just embrace the moment as it is, imperfections and all. How do we bring wabi-sabi into our daily lives?
Well, Susan suggests starting with your senses. Really pay attention to the details around you. Notice things like how the sunlight comes through your window in the morning, or the sound of birds singing, even the texture of your favorite blanket. It's about engaging with the world in a more mindful way, appreciating those everyday moments that we usually take for granted.
It's like you're resetting your perception, looking at everything with fresh eyes. And I think that can be so powerful for women our age, especially if you're feeling a little disconnected or lonely. It's a way to reconnect, not just with ourselves, but with the world.
That's right. And Susan emphasizes that these mindful moments don't have to be anything big or fancy. It could be as simple as really enjoying your morning cup of tea, Noticing the aroma, the warmth of the mug, the taste.
It's about bringing that same awareness to everyday things, finding joy in the ordinary. Susan also talks about doing activities that are naturally mindful, right?
Yes, she suggests things like gardening, knitting, or just taking a quiet walk in nature. These are all things that help us get out of our heads and connect with the rhythm of nature, Find a sense of flow.
Oh, I love that. I can just picture myself in my garden, feeling the soil, listening to the bees, and feeling so present in that moment. It's the perfect way to quiet that mental chatter.
And it's so cool. These activities don't just bring peace in the moment, they also help us build resilience. By practicing mindfulness, we're learning how to cope with stress better, to get through tough times and find joy even when things are hard.
That's such an important message. It's like we're building a toolkit for our well-being, giving ourselves what we need to thrive no matter what. Susan's story shows us that, doesn't it? She went through some difficult times during the pandemic, but she found a way to not just get by, but to come out stronger on the other side.
Absolutely. And that's what's so inspiring about Susan's message. She's not some guru. She's a woman like us who went through real struggles and found that peace isn't some far-off place. It's a choice we can make each day.
It's like peace is always within reach, no matter what. It's about making those small choices every day to live in a more mindful, present, and joyful way.
And remember, it's not a race. There will be days when those anxious thoughts come back. that monkey mind starts acting up again. That's okay. Mindfulness isn't about being perfect. It's about noticing those thoughts and gently bringing yourself back to the present.
It's about being kind to ourselves, right? Knowing that we're all on this journey together, and each step we take towards peace, each moment of presence, is something to celebrate.
Exactly. And don't forget, you're not alone in this. Susan's blog has so many tips, inspiring stories, and even a community of women who are on this journey too. We'll include a link to her blog, Time for Tranquility, in our show notes.
We hope this deep dive into Susan's blog has inspired you to try mindfulness for yourself. Remember, peace is within reach, one breath at a time, one moment at a time.